Hi, I'm Diane Reinhardt with The Veil Removed. Welcome to our 7th webinar. For those of you who have been with us since the beginning, thank you so much for your support and welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, The Veil Removed is a short 5-minute film that shows how heaven and earth come together during the Mass. Go to theveilremoved.com and check it out. You'll also find many resources there as well. So before I introduce my guest, I have a couple thank yous to put out there. First of all, thank you to all of you who responded to our poll. We had so many great questions and we're going to get to as many as we can. Second of all, I just want to thank all our prayer warriors and our financial donors. It is our intention to always bring our webinars, our Advent and Lent challenges, our TVR talks, everything free of charge, but we can't do that without your support. So first of all, if you are listening and you want to scroll down to the donate button and hit that, we're not going to turn it down. Thank you so much for your prayers and your financial support. Okay, without further ado, I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Steve Ray. Steve is a convert to the Catholic faith. He is a best-selling author with 3 best-selling books on Ignatius Press. He is a host of a 10-week video series filmed in Jerusalem on the footprints of God. He and his wife, Janet, are certified guides to the Holy Land and have brought thousands of people closer to Christ. He's a father and a grandfather to 19 grandchildren. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I don't know how you found the time to join us, but we sure appreciate it. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Diane. Happy to be here, and I'm glad to join you. And yeah, we've done all those things, movies and pilgrimages and books and everything. But the thing I'm proudest of is I've been married to that same beautiful woman for it'll be 46 years this year. And I love her more now than when I married her. And I think she's prettier too, by the way. And those 4 kids who are devoutly Catholic, fiercely Catholic, I should say, and 19 grandkids who are little apologists and Bible teachers, actually. So I give talks called Keeping Your Kids Catholic. And I did one at Steubenville this last weekend. It was at the end of July. I did a talk there for a lot of people on how to keep your kids Catholic and how to bring them back once they leave. So that's what I'm proudest of.
Well, funny you should bring that up because that's one of the questions that's going to come up a little bit later. But Steve, before we dive into all of our questions, I would like to start us off in prayer, if you're willing.
Absolutely.
In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Holy Spirit, please join this space, join this conversation. We're so grateful for bringing us together today. May you inspire Steve to share his knowledge and what's in his heart. And may you inspire all of us who are listening and watching to be moved, to be brought nearer to Jesus, and to help us reach out to others to bring them closer in their faith walk. We give you all glory today, Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So Steve, one of the first things obviously that people want to hear about, you were raised in a Baptist home. So can you tell us a little bit about that and why you started exploring Catholicism?
Well, yes, I was raised, my parents in 1953, because of Billy Graham, became very devout Baptists and had 12 years of miscarriages, asked God now that they were Christians to give them a child. I was born the next year. My mom said I was an answer to her prayer until I became Catholic, and then God misunderstood her prayers. But they had 3 boys after that, myself, David, and Timothy, and they raised us to be good Baptist kids. We had a great childhood, and they showed me what it was to be holy. They didn't have the sacraments, the papacy, they didn't have any of these things, the devotions, but they loved the Lord and they loved the Bible and they loved being Christians. And my dad was quite the evangelist. So we had a great childhood, and it made it easy for me to get married and know how to be a husband and a father and a Christian because I had a great school. That was the school of my childhood, living with mom and dad. And about 15 years old, I got, it was back in the late 60s and early 70s. I graduated in 1973. Now, you know, I'm 68 years old this year. And we had, I got into trouble. You know, I was a wild, rebellious kid, went for 2 years during the late 60s. And then in the middle of the summer of I was 17 years old. I remember I heard Billy Graham on the radio. My mom had him on, and I walked down the street and started to cry, looked up at the stars and said, Jesus, I'm only 17 years old, but tonight I'm going to give my total of my life to you. That was the most important moment of my life. It set the whole trajectory with a rocket taking off for my life. Went to school that year. They brought a girl to me who had just moved from California, said, she just found Jesus too. You got to meet her. And she said God spoke to her that day when she was 15, said, that's the man you're going to marry. And she's sitting right in the chair in the other room there. We've been married now for 46 years. I met her when she was 15. I was 17. We were great evangelical Protestants. We loved being Protestants. I was an evangelist. I was never a pastor, but we loved the Lord, and I did a lot of Bible studies and things, and we homeschooled our kids. I started my own business out of our dining room, built it up to $12 million a year and 600 employees, sold it to do what I do now. But this is kind of the question you asked, is I did not become Catholic because I saw anything good about the Catholic Church, because I didn't. And the Catholics I knew didn't have a clue. There were good reasons why I should never be a Catholic. But I became Catholic, my wife and I together, when we saw the problems with Protestantism. And as we saw the incurable problems of Protestantism that were insurmountable, I would say, it drove us into the arms of the Catholic Church. A friend of mine named Al Cresta, who was a radio talk show host, we've been best friends since 1983. That shows how old I am. We homeschooled our kids together, evangelical Protestants. He became Catholic. I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. You're way too smart to be a Catholic. But then in the process of the next year, Janet and I saw the beauty of the Catholic Church. And I wrote a book called Crossing the Tiber. It was a love letter to my parents to try and explain it to them. It has sold so many copies. It sells better now than it did when I wrote it. Ignatius Press, Crossing the Tiber. And we came into the church in 1994, and we've never looked back.
Wow, that's an amazing, amazing story. I think that really hits home what you said, that sometimes we don't do our best evangelizing. You said you didn't see anything good about the Catholic Church. I don't know how many people you were exposed to that were Catholic, but it is hard sometimes. We don't know what we know, with Bible scripture. But also I wanted to ask you, following up with that, what did you come to know or believe in order to become Catholic, and then why the need to convert?
I would have to say it was really the very first Christians, the martyrs, the apostolic fathers. There's a whole category of early Christians called church fathers. These are the ones that were the great teachers, and they were like with a machete cutting their way through the jungle, because you and I now, Catholics, everything is paid for. They got catechisms, everything is there, beautiful churches. Those first Christians, it was illegal. They would be killed, martyred, eaten by lions, burned in the fire for what they believed and what they knew was true. And so when I go back and look at for example, everything that we believed was from Bible alone. Sola Scriptura, that was it. The Bible was all we needed. God spoke in the book. The book was for me. The Holy Spirit lived in me. He helped me interpret his own book, so I had it made. That was a very cool methodology there. Until I realized that the New Testament wasn't even collected and put into a book until the end of the 4th century. John the Apostle did not write the words, you must be born again by water and spirit, until 100 AD. When he wrote the Gospel of John. How did the people for the first 70 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, how did they know how to get born again? John hadn't even written it yet. And once he had written it, who could read it? 85% of the people up until the 1800s have been illiterate. You couldn't afford your own Bible because it would cost 3 years' wages. There was no such thing as paper and printing presses. You had to have animal skins. It would cost you 3 years' wages to have your own Bible. How did people for 1,500 years have a religion based on a book if they didn't have a book and couldn't have read it if they did have a book? So this is what really I look back at the early church fathers, those who knew the apostles: Ignatius of Antioch, Polycarp of Smyrna, Irenaeus of Lyon, Clement of Rome. These guys, excuse me, these guys followed Christ, died for Christ, taught the gospel, taught the whole theology, developed the doctrine of the Trinity over the next 100 years and so, and yet they never had the Bible in their hands. What they had, we realized, Janet and I, is that there was Jesus when he went up into heaven. This is what I tell people on the Mount of Olives. I'm going to be back in Israel 3 more times this year with groups. I've already done 2 sold-out groups already this year. When we're on the Mount of Olives and I say, this is where Jesus ascended into heaven, we don't have this written in the Bible, but he actually said just before he hit the cloud is, hey guys, before I go all the way up, don't forget to read my book.
Did not say that.
He didn't. There was no book. What did he leave behind? Not a book. He left behind 12 men, one of them carrying the keys of the kingdom. Those 12 men went out and taught everything that Jesus had taught them and practiced it, and that became the apostolic tradition. Some of their writings got included and collected, 27 of them, not 26, not 28, and the councils of the church and the Pope decided which ones those were around 400 AD, and those books were included then in the New Testament, which hadn't existed for 400 years. And so Jesus did not leave behind a book. He left behind a living church, a magisterium. Those guys taught and practiced. It became known as the tradition, and later some of it got written down, and that became the New Testament. So you have scripture, tradition, and magisterium. And when I realized that, and it wasn't, and it couldn't, and it could never be Bible alone, sola scriptura, and that there was such a thing as a living church, there was a magisterium, there was a sacred tradition, all of a sudden it all made sense to me. There's not 40,000 different churches and denominations. There's one holy Catholic and apostolic church. And somewhere along the way, our tradition had fallen off the tracks and rolled down the hill. And when I realized I was practicing a different religion than the early Christians, my wife and I decided to get back up on the track and start going again with the one holy Catholic and apostolic church. And here I am.
I heard also that when you were looking at different churches throughout your pilgrimage, that you saw that the altars were in the center of, where people get up and speak. The podium is now in the middle, but it was the altar.
Right. Every church had one thing in common. Churches have very few things in common. They do now, but I've been in churches in Egypt where they don't even have pews. They kneel and they stand and they on the floor with their foreheads down on the floor. All churches are all different throughout time. Janet and I have been to all of the oldest churches in the world, the first ones built through all of our pilgrimages in Israel. I don't care if it's in Egypt or Italy, wherever they are. We've been to at least the ones I know, the oldest churches ever built, and all of them have one thing in common. They all have an altar up in the front. They don't all have tabernacles. They don't all have chairs. Some made of wood, stone, or brick. They're all different kinds, but one thing is in common, and that is the altar. People say, no, Steve, it's the tabernacle. That's what's important. No, it's not, because there wouldn't be anything in the tabernacle if it weren't for the altar. The altar is where the consecration takes place. And so I realized that all through history for the first 1,500 years until the rebels came along, Martin Luther, Melanchthon, Bucer, and all those guys, there was always an altar, and it was the center point of the church, and in front of the altar was a priest. Those guys came along in the Reformation, which I call the Deformation, and they chucked all of these Catholic things out, and in the place of the altar, they put a podium and a preacher, and now it was a different religion. And I realized I was in a different religion than the first 1,500 years, and I decided to get back on track.
So that's a great point about the altar, Steve. Let's just talk about what takes place on the altar. How did you come to believe that the Eucharist was the true presence of God and not just a symbol?
So do you want me to give my 1 hour version? Because I have a talk called Defending the Eucharist. You are what you eat. And with this whole new 3-year emphasis on the Eucharist, I'm giving that talk all over the place. I've given it 80 times at Capernaum, where it actually took place with my groups. I've given that talk 80 times. But
we would love to hear the whole story. Maybe condense it into 5.
I'll 2 minutes here. Well, I always said that Jesus said what he meant and meant what he said, except there, when he said, this is my body, or when he said, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. John chapter 6 is a stunning chapter. John does not have the consecration up in the upper room. He explains the theology of it in John chapter 6. And in there that he had probably 15,000 disciples were there at the moment. And he said to them, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And he actually uses a word, and the word for eat is trogo. And it means it means to gnaw, to munch, to chew. You get an image of a dog chewing on a bone. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood. That's how they heard it in Greek, because that's the word he used. And they're scandalized, and they all start to walk away. They said, this is a hard saying. What are you talking about? We can't eat. We're not cannibals, and we can't even drink blood. The book of Leviticus tells us we can't eat blood. So they all start to walk away. He could have called them back and said, hey, guys, really, come on. I'm only speaking symbolically, like someday Steve Ray is going to believe as a Baptist. But he didn't call them back. He let them go. And then he turns to his disciples and said, are you going to go too? And I realized that as a Baptist, I walked away with those unbelieving Jews. When they walked away from Jesus, I walked away too, because I rejected what he taught. I didn't believe what he said. He said, eat my flesh and drink my blood. I think what Peter said that day was, Lord, we have no idea what you're talking about, eating flesh and drinking blood. But one thing we know is that you're not from around here. You're like a space alien. You came from outside down here, and you taught us things from God in heaven that we could have never known, things that we can't know with our five senses. And we've learned that if we stay with you long enough, even though they're hard sayings, you'll help us to understand them and practice them. So we're going to stay with you because you have the words of eternal life. I think that's what Peter really said, and John just condensed. I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek there, but that's what really brought us to the reality of it, is that the whole church, not only when you read the Old and the New Testament, is it very clear that it is the real presence, that it's more spectacular and miraculous than the manna. And then you look at the early church, they all believed it. In my book, Crossing the Tiber, the whole last third is on the Eucharist, where I talk about the first 4 centuries. What did the early Christians believe? They believed that it was the real body and blood of Jesus, and that by eating it, you became part of the divine, participating in the divine nature. You are what you eat, in other words. And so why would they, who were the closest to Jesus, understood the language, why would they adamantly believe that it was the real presence of Christ, even enough to die for it? And yet here I am just frivolously eating saltine crackers and Welch's grape juice in the Baptist church, and only 4 times a year. So that I could go on and on about that, but that's one of the reasons why I know that we knew that it was the real presence. And I know that my senses lied to me about a lot of things, and my senses lied to me about the substance of what's on the altar. And I'm going to believe Jesus before I believe my own senses on that one.
So we may not always understand what our Creator says, but we either trust his words or we don't.
That's what Peter said. We're going to follow you. We don't understand it either. We're about ready to follow those others out and walk away from you, but we know who you are, and we know that you will help us eventually understand it. And they did. And so we understand it. Our senses may lie to us about the substance of it, and we may not completely understand all of it, but we know that we can trust Jesus and the church, even though many times our senses, for example, you have eyes, I have eyes. Have you ever seen an angel? And yet, do you believe angels exist? Of course you do. Why? Because the Bible and God and the church have taught us angels exist. So we believe angels exist even when our senses tell us they don't.
And they'll see angels in the veilremoved.com, the Veil Remove films.
Yeah, by the way, that little film you made is really quite stunning, and my wife and I enjoyed watching that, and we've shared it with people because it is really quite stunning. And there was one time when we became Catholics, we were going to a charismatic parish, and one time all the kids saw angels, and they were all kind of like there was a hush in the room, and the kids were telling their parents they saw angels up in the front. So.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. I think that film helps people visualize what does take place.
Right. And it's above and beyond our senses. It's above and beyond our senses.
Exactly. So, okay. So how do we help others, like non-Catholics and Catholics alike, come to believe in the Holy Eucharist? And also, I know someone else was very specific about how we have such a hard time evangelizing. So how do we help our brothers and sisters come to realize, and then maybe is there some wording that can help us help them realize?
Well, our whole culture and society has fallen for the lie of scientism, that the only thing you can know is by your 5 senses and what you can see in a microscope and a telescope. And so one of the big problems is that we're dealing with a whole generation and a culture that rejects the supernatural. They reject anything that is beyond what their senses can tell them or what science tells them. And like we just talked about a bit ago, and we have to help people understand that there's a whole world outside of our senses, 5 senses, those are the 5 gates. Everything we decide does or doesn't exist, whatever, we based on those 5: seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, and touching. And when the modern culture says that science science is the final word. This is the big lie today. Everybody say follow the science. They're not following the science. They're following politics. But anyway, that's another whole topic. So we have to help people understand that there is another world beyond that. God does exist. And that's the first hurdle, because there's no sense in telling them that the Eucharist is the body and blood of Christ if they don't believe in a supernatural world. So it all begins really with discussing atheism and theism, how did the whole world get here? And I have a thing I wrote up for my kids when they were young called You Are a Detective, and we track it. There's only two possibilities. Either everything got here by space plus time plus chance, something has to be eternal, or by a personal creator. Those are the only two. Something is eternal, either a creator or matter and energy. One answers all the questions, one doesn't answer all the questions. And we've got to get people thinking back in terms of that again. Otherwise, to try and get them to understand the Eucharist is futile because they reject the supernatural world. But once we get people listen to that, I think the best thing you can do is go through Scripture and show them what the Bible actually says, and then go through the early church and show them how it was practiced and believed by people, even willing to die for it. Now, you have to ask, would you be willing to be eaten by lions for the teaching of the Eucharist, the Catholic teaching of the Eucharist? The way I explain it when I give a talk is there's a statue of Jupiter over here, and you all have to come up and bow down to Jupiter, and if you don't, then over here we're going to cut your head off. That's what the early Christians faced. It was usually over the Eucharist because it was that secret thing where they ate, cannibals, they ate the body and blood of Christ. So the question is, are we as Catholics ourselves willing to die a martyr's death for the Eucharist? Or not. And if we're not, then nobody's going to believe us that we really believe it. If we're not willing to die for it, nobody's going to take us serious.
So really, we need to be convicted in our faith and strong in our faith walk to be an example first and foremost. And then just walking with that person, maybe. I think it all starts with relationships and showing how much you care about that individual.
It does. When we were, as evangelicals, when we did evangelism, we called it relational evangelism. You build relationships in order to talk to people about what matters to you. You can't walk up to a man at a bus stop and say, "Hello, sir, how are your kidneys today?" He's going to say, "My kidneys are none of your business." But if I spend a year with that man, helping him find out he does have kidney problems, and I bring food for him, take him to the hospital. A year later, if I walk up to him on the street and say, "Sir, how are your kidneys today?" He's going to say, "Oh, well, thank you for asking." And he's going to go, what's the difference? I built a relationship with him that allowed me to be personal with him, to tell him things that are important to me, and to find out what's important and share with him. It's called relational evangelism, where you build relationships, exactly what you just said.
So now just going in a little bit deeper, how do parents and grandparents, I mean, you had said how your little grandchildren are all evangelists, and I shouldn't say little because it looks like you have some adult grandchildren as well. But how, since now you're in a relationship, you've got your family members and grandkids, how do you help them specifically to not only have that great devotion to the Eucharist, but to maintain it? Because we all know how many pulls in our society our kids, all of us, have on our time and our attention.
I do a talk called How to Keep Your Kids Catholic. And my basic theme is kids will love what their parents love. You need a father in the home. It's very difficult to get them to do anything correct or right or live their lives right if they don't have a father in the home, which is why our society is in such big trouble today. There's a lack of strong fathers. But the kids will love what their parents love. Not always. The book of Proverbs says, raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he'll not depart from it. That's not a promise, it's a statistic. Usually, if you raise up your child in a certain way, they're going to be faithful to it when they get older too. Just look at the Amish. They do this, and most of their kids stay and continue to be Amish. Why? Because the parents do it, and the parents are devoted to it and love it, so the kids love it too. Most Jews stay Jews. Why? Because their parents, because there's a culture involved. If our parents just sit around on the television and they drink beer and they eat potato chips and they watch sports, what are the kids going to do when they get older? They're going to sit on the couch and they're going to drink beer, eat potato chips, and watch sports. But if the parents are involved in the faith and they love it and it's part of their life. So all the way when I was raising my kids, and we homeschooled them because I wasn't going to allow the public schools, and we didn't get them a television. The best thing parents can do is get rid of the television and get rid of the devices. None of my grandkids have television. They're all homeschooled. None of them have iPhones and gadgets until they're 18 years old. And they do not complain. They read books to each other. They play board games. They have a blast together. And this is what you have to do you have to teach kids today to be rebels, to be countercultural. Al Cresta and I, we made a plan with our wives when our kids were just being born back in 1983 and 84. We said, we're going to do this radical experiment and raise our kids to be rebels. We're going to raise them to be countercultural to this American culture, which is quickly going to hell in a handbasket. And just recently we had dinner together and we said, look, it worked. All of our kids are faithful Catholics. We both have around 19 grandkids. All of them are faithful Catholics. It worked, but it doesn't work without hard work, with effort. And the parents have to live it, and they have to love it, and they have to practice it, and they have to get rid of the sources that are bringing in the garbage into the home to try and influence the kids negatively. Get rid of that stuff and love the family. Dads, discipline the kids. Dads, teach the kids. Dads, spend time with your kids. Be an example. And your kids will usually stay Catholic.
So I think that's a beautiful example. Unfortunately, I would say probably most people do not raise their children that way. Most people don't homeschool. I mean, I think a lot of people in my circle send their kids to Catholic school, but not even everybody does that. There's phones, TVs in my home. But I also know that a lot of people who raise their kids Catholic, maybe not as devoutly as you did, their kids are gone. And that's not just in my circle. That's a statistic that people are leaving the Catholic faith. So you give a great example. And I think for those who are just starting, hey, do that experiment. How about for those of us who are like, got a couple that are really good, couple that are wayward? What would you say?
Well, the whole answer is what's important to your life? What's more important? Careers, jobs, television, or the results that's going to happen with your kids someday? So we made a choice. We made a choice that the most important thing was our kids, and we were going to live in a way that when they were older, they would not look back and say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. We wanted to raise our kids in such a way that when they're older, they would still love the Lord. I mean, most of my kids are daily mass attenders, and my grandkids are so devout, they put me to shame. And also, I'll tell you this too, when it comes to university, this is where you lose your kids. Catholics are losing their kids. More than half will not be Catholic when they go through the pipeline of the university on the other side. So what I did is I said to my kids, the Lord blessed us financially, so I could afford to pay for our kids going to college, but they had to get straight A's in order for me to pay for them all the way through. Our kids all graduated without owing a penny because I made a deal with them. But I also said, you can go to any university in the world you want. No problem. I'll support you and go anywhere you want, but I'll pay for these 5. Parents have the checkbook. Parents have control. Parents are the ones that can say where they're going to college. You want them to go off to a Catholic college that's no longer a Catholic college, and they're going to lose their faith, go off to a secular college. And pretty soon, guess what? Paul says, bad company corrupts good morals. Bad company. You have to control who your kids are spending their time with. And that I did. We did that. We broke off some friendships that our kids had because I knew that they were, and my kids later said, thank you, Dad, you saved my life when you kept me away from that boy. My oldest daughter did. So this is, send them off to college. That's great. But you pay for the ones you know. Steubenville, Ave Maria University, all of the, what? Benedictine and the Christendom, the good. And some kids shouldn't even go to these liberal arts schools. They should go learn how to be plumbers and electricians. They're not going to ever use all of the 4 years of liberal arts. Some boys and girls are going to want to learn how to be nurses. One of our daughter graduated as a nurse from a good Catholic university. And we've got an interior designer, we've got a financial planner, and we've got a PhD in philosophy. But I chose the schools they went to because I have the money.
Yeah, it takes the parents' time, attention, and investment into their kids' souls. But
Yep.
how do you get the parents back to the church?
Well, you have, like we talked earlier, build relationships. But people have fallen for the lie. People have fallen for the lie that that basically the world is secular and it's basically scientism, and we just go to this thing every Sunday morning called a mass because we're supposed to, and it makes us feel good. And if that's the way people think, there's really no way that you're going to get them back. A lot of times it takes a traumatic experience in their life or a really good friend who is such a good example that, yeah, I have 7 rules for dealing with non-Catholic family and friends. And the 7th one is ask God to bring somebody else into their life to influence them, because they're never going to listen to you. Kids, once they're 25 and out of university, become atheists, they're not going to come back home and listen to you. They already rejected you and the way you raised them. So in that case, you pray for somebody else to come into their life, somebody that sits in the cubicle next to them at work, somebody they respect, some sports figure who becomes or is a good Catholic. I know so many friends that became Catholic and very devout because they bumped into somebody who had a big influence on them. Tim Staples, who's the apologist, evangelist that people know about a lot, he had a guy in the Marines, and this guy knew his faith. He knew the Bible. He knew it better than most evangelicals do. And he was unrelenting with Tim Staples, the Pentecostal Assemblies of God guy. And over time, Tim Staples became a Catholic. And then what happened is every one of his family members became Catholic, all because one guy he bumped into in the military. So I think that a lot of times it's when we come into contact with somebody. And by the way, I always say, pray for them that they'll find somebody else who will influence them. And when you're out and about, you should be talking to people because you may be the answer to some other parent's prayer.
That's such a great point. I think we are not going to win everybody over, but the Holy Spirit is our best advocate. If we just need to pray to the Holy Spirit for those souls and also for someone to be in that in their circle of influence. And that's a great reminder to you to open up to people and not be afraid. If I feel a movement like, oh, I need to reach out to that person, just do it. The worst that I can do is be rejected.
That's why I wear this cross everywhere. I'm not a jewelry kind of a guy. Believe me, I'm not a jewelry guy. I wear this because it starts conversations. People will say, that's beautiful. And that's beautiful. I like that. I said, thank you very much. I wear it proudly as a Catholic. They don't know quite what to say. Some of them say, well, that's wonderful. Me too. I'm a Catholic. But one time a guy said, well, you don't believe it, do you? I said, of course I believe it, enough to die for it. This was at an airport, and he stormed away. He ended up sitting next to me on the airplane. He was an atheist. And in the flight, he taps me on the shoulder and he said, do you have a few minutes? I said, yes. He says, you really believe that? And I said, oh, you mean my cross? Or yes. I said, I really do believe it. He says, I'm an atheist. I don't believe anything. Could you take a few minutes to share with me why I should be a Christian? And I had him for 2 hours on the plane. This is why I wear this, because every day it starts conversations. My wife says you have to get up every morning with your antennas up, and you should be looking for the people that God wants you to talk to. Even to say every morning, Lord, I want to talk to 2 people today, so bring them my way. Maybe God's like on a chessboard, moving people around to get them into your presence today. And if you don't talk to them, oh, God says, now I got to start all over with that person. But if you are open to that, and one lady told me, I've never had more fun in my life since you 2 did the antenna thing, because now I get up every day and say, Lord, I want to talk to 2 people, bring them my way all day long. She said, I'm so excited. Is it him? Is it him? And she'll say, God bless you, or do something. My wife opened the door for an elderly lady one time, and she said, because she had her arms full of groceries, and the lady says, thank you very much, young lady. My wife said, oh, you're welcome. We're Catholics and we love to help people. Now, Catholics love to do good things for people, but they don't tell people why they're doing good things for them. Tell them you're a Catholic. Tell them we do this because as Christians, we believe everybody has great value. And this starts a conversation. You asked earlier, how do we get people it's by us opening up, but we're afraid to, because the world is now telling us, you Catholics, shut up. You're not allowed to speak in politics. You're not allowed to speak in the workplace. You're supposed to follow the liberal atheistic line. You shut up. And I'm saying, I'm not going to shut up. Don't tell me to shut up. I'm not going to shut up. I live in a country where I have free speech, and I'm a Christian, and I'll die for what I believe, and I'll say it if I want to. And this is how we get things going again. If we quit being shy and scared. If we really believe it, then let's practice it.
That's so great. That's such a great reminder. I really appreciate that. I'm going to have my antenna up today. Okay, let's see. Let's move on. I think we're going to move into, you mentioned about how everybody's so afraid to be Catholic. And a question that came in that kind of sparks my memory here is so many people leaving the church due to indifference, divisions, or scandals. What makes you stay? And are you ever tempted to leave? And I just wanted to throw in one thing. Our last guest, Father Luke Doyle, said that when he wears his priestly collar, which he does everywhere, that always sparks conversations too. But they're not always really good ones, and they're not always fruitful. He has been spat upon because he was wearing his, cleric. So yeah, I'm just curious to see with all of this, how do you stay strong? And have you ever considered leaving once you converted?
Never. It's the church. Once I came intellectually, philosophically, theologically, archaeologically, biblically to conclude that this is the church, I'm not going anywhere. The United States is a great country, but it's riddled with scandals, with problems, lousy politicians, inflation. But am I ever tempted to leave America and go to another country? No. Why? Because I love America. It's my country. I have an American passport. It's the most wonderful country in the world, which is why, even with all its problems, people are trying to cross the borders into our country. You don't see people leaving our country. You see people trying to get in. Why? Even though it's riddled with scandals and problems and every kind of issue you can imagine, people still want to come here because there's freedom and it is the best country in the world. Now, I'm in part of the Catholic Church. It also is riddled with scandals and problems and issues, all the way up to the top in the Vatican. And yet, why would I leave? It's the only thing. It's like Peter says, where else do I have the words of eternal life? Where else am I going to have the real body and blood of Christ? Where am I going to have my sins forgiven in confession? Where am I going to have, when Jesus comes back, he's coming back to his church. That's where he's going to come back. And I know that there are people leaving, but they're leaving because they're foolish, and they're leaving before they really discover what the Catholic Church really is. And but there's also a lot of people coming in. There's a trade going on, Diane, and this is the way it works. Catholics are losing their less intelligent, immoral people. Those are the ones that are leaving. Protestantism we are gaining from Protestants the best and the brightest. So the people coming into the church are the best and the brightest and the smartest and the ones who want to be saints. The ones who are leaving are the opposite. Those who don't care, don't want to be saints. They want to live the worldly lifestyle. I think the trade's pretty good. The trade that's going on is pretty good. Let's keep it going. The ones who don't want to follow it, don't want to be believers, don't waste our time in the pews. Those who want to come from want to be holy, want to believe in these things, you're welcome. This is what Benedict said, Pope Benedict, that we're going to have a smaller church, but it's going to be a church full of believers. So no, I've never been tempted to leave. Never been tempted to leave. There's nowhere to go.
Okay, so we're not tempted to leave, but this leads into another question. So for those of us who receive communion every week, if not daily, how do you keep that sense of awe with the Eucharist? Because the veil remove is all about Eucharistic amazement. That's our mission. So how would you help people be in awe? And then I have a story to share too, but go ahead.
Well, I think that we're human beings and that we wake up grouchy some mornings and tired some mornings, and we're not going to even be in awe of the fact that this beautiful woman wants to live with me every day. We take things for granted. And I have to realize every day that I'm lucky she's here. I'm lucky she loves me and wants to stay with me. And I have to do whatever I can to keep that going. I have to earn her love again every day. But there are many days where both of us take each other for granted and we're not excited about it. And we just get up in the morning and it's the same with everything else, isn't it? It's the same with the Eucharist. We go there. We're not always enthusiastic about it. We're human beings. We got other things on our mind. But there are times where we stop and reflect and say, oh, you know what? I'm pretty darn lucky to have the Eucharist. And yeah, it is what it says it is. And you know what? I'm going to go back and read the Fathers of the Church again, or I'm going to read the Mystics again, or I'm going to go back and read devotionals again. And we're roller coaster people, aren't we? We're happy one day, sad the next day. We're appreciative of the Eucharist one day. We take it for granted the next day. And we have to realize there's nothing wrong with us that we're like that. That's because we are what we are. But the more that we can instill this is why Pentecostals, when they get together, they're all enthusiastic about the Lord and they're singing, dance, but it takes 2 hours of music to get them to that fever pitch. They don't get that. They don't walk in the meeting the Pentecostal meeting in that fever pitch the minute they walk in. It takes 2 hours of music to get going, and pretty soon, oh yeah. And this is the way we are. And that's a rock concert does the same thing. People go into a rock concert, and by the time it's over, they're all passionate, singing and dancing, but they got moved by the music and things. And really, the Mass, if it's celebrated properly, should be like that. We should come in dry in holy water and bless ourselves and confess our sins, and it builds. The Mass should build. If we ever know what's going on, it builds to the crescendo. What's the crescendo? It's the body and blood of Christ, the source and summit of our faith. So the Mass should be kind of like a Pentecostal meeting where you're getting worked up and worked up and worked up to when you get to the crescendo, which is the Eucharist. And then we say, oh, thank you, Lord, for the Eucharist. And we all give each other sign of peace, and we love each other, and we go out to share it with other people. So we're not always going to be excited about it because we are who we are, but we can always work at it and study more about it and pray more about it and realize what's going on in the Mass. And things like your movie, The Veil Removed, those kind of things help us to appreciate it and understand it when we realize what is really happening in front of our eyes, even though we may be hungry and tired and lazy or grouchy when we go in.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, I think one of the gifts of the COVID restrictions was having the Eucharist taken away. So then when I went back to Mass, it had opened in another state before our state. And I just happened to be visiting my daughter there. And she said, Mom, guess what? We get to go to Mass this Sunday. And I'm like, what? So, you know, I'm sitting there and it just strikes me that I'm about ready to receive my Creator. And, you know, we say the words, Lord, I am not worthy. And it really struck me how unworthy I am. And how did I really spend my time during the restrictions? Was it, you know, in edifying activities? Not always, but I just remember receiving again for the first time, and how even though I am not worthy, He gives Himself in that gift to every one of us. He wants us all to receive. And I literally went up in the line with snot, tears, everything coming down. So I try to evoke that memory when I say those words, Lord, I am not worthy. And that helped me. So that was a gift of the restriction.
Yeah. One of the bad things about the restrictions, though, is too many people started going to Mass on television, and they think, well, that's just as good. The bishops told us we could go to Mass on television, and it's a whole lot easier, and I can have a cup of coffee during the Mass nowadays. So that I think that the whole restriction thing was a disaster overall. I think it had a positive influence on people like you, but overall, I think it's been very detrimental. And I was lucky enough, we found a church where the parish priest decided he was going to have Mass normally through the whole thing, and we went every Sunday to Mass. And we had communion on the tongue, and there were no masks, and there were no pews separated off, and there were hymn books and holy water, and nobody got sick.
Wow, that's remarkable. That's remarkable. Well, we just need to let the Holy Spirit lead us. Speaking of leading, I want to get to your pilgrimages because we definitely had questions about that as well. And I know both you and your lovely wife go on all these pilgrimages together. At some point, we're going to have her on the show as well. But a couple of the questions were, so you've been to the Holy Land too many times to count, and you've led over 88 pilgrimages. I think that's correct. What do you find impacts people the most? And if you could only take your pilgrims to 3 sites, what would they be? So most powerful impact and 3. I know it's hard to narrow down to 3, but that was a question.
My wife and I have been to the Holy Land over 180 times. We've led 80 pilgrimages. That means that with buses. Other times we've gone on our own with our family or making our documentary movies called The Footprints of God. And that's only to Israel. That doesn't count. That 180 doesn't count Syria and Egypt and Jordan and Iraq and all the other countries that we've been to and visited many, many times. This year, I'll just explain. This year, we've already had 2 sold-out trips to the Holy Land. We have 3 more coming up. One includes Jordan for the first 5 days. We finished the Lourdes and Fatima. We finished the Saints and Shrines of Italy. We're taking 2 groups to Oberammergau. We're leaving, in fact, in 3 days to take 60 people back to Germany again. So the St. Paul cruise, and we've got 10 more scheduled for next year. So we're back in the air again. We're busier than we've ever been. Holy Land, what makes an impact on people? like we talked earlier, that we get complacent in our Christian faith. We get complacent, and even to believe that it's, when we hear it, it becomes almost like, once upon a time in a land far away, there was a Jesus and Mary. And what impacts people, and why I love pilgrimages and why I made that documentary movie series, is because I want people to know it's true. These places really exist. This is not a fairy tale. This is rooted in history. It's rooted, the story of salvation is a story, but it's a factual history of what God has done in space and time. I remember once when I took a man to Capernaum when we were there, and he said to me, he says, I'm on this pilgrimage with this group. He said, but I really don't want to be here. I'm a reluctant pilgrim. He said, I went fishing. My wife went fishing with me for 2 weeks last year, and this is my payback. We made a deal. And I just said to him, I said, I said, that's fine. I'm glad you're here. But I said, be careful, because you think you came to touch the land, but the land is going to reach up and touch you. We were at Capernaum the third day in. We always have Mass at Capernaum at the synagogue, where Jesus spoke the words, eat my body and drink my blood. That really was spoken. And I'm at the synagogue, and I said to people, this is where those words were spoken. We had Mass there. When the man came out, because I always have the deacon or the priest, when he reads it, it's always John chapter 6. All the Masses are site specific. They're not the readings of the day. They're always about that location. So when we're there, we always read John chapter 6. So I eat my flesh and I drink my blood. I say to the priest and the deacon, when you're done, the last verse of the reading said, these words are spoken in Capernaum at the synagogue. I said, I want you to, when you read that, I want you to point, because everybody to look over and see, that's the synagogue right there where those words were spoken that you just heard. The man came out with tears running down his eyes, and he said, Steve, he said, you were right. I'm not a reluctant pilgrim anymore. I just realized where I am and what happened here. So people come there, they get tears in their eyes, and it's at different places. It may be at the birthplace of Christ. Always it's at the tomb, people cry. It's a lot of times Gethsemane, where we have Mass around the rock where Jesus sweat drops of blood. And it's always the reading about agony. And it's dark in that church on purpose to remember the agony that took place. And people just weep when they're there and they hear that gospel passage read. Or maybe it's in the prison he was kept over Holy Thursday night. There's a big cistern. I take them down in that. I turn off the lights and I tell them, Holy Thursday night, Jesus was down here, probably in the mud and the sweat. He could have escaped, could have called 72,000 angels, but he didn't, because he loved you. And I read Psalm 88, which is prophetic about his night in prison there, and people come out of there just stunned. So that's the thing, to see that it really happened, and the Holy Spirit really has an opportunity to, boom, hit you when you're there. Now, my favorite places, if I had 3 places to take people, of course, you have to go to the Church of Nativity where he was born. There's a 14-pointed star you go down and touch. And you have to go to Calvary and the tomb, all under one roof, called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They're only 100 feet apart. And you go, we take our groups early in the morning. People say, you're going to get us up at what time? I say 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock? Are you crazy? I said, you'll thank me later. We get up at 4 o'clock. We go and we walk the Stations of the Cross, the real Via Dolorosa, the real one, where Jesus walked with his cross. We end up coming to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre when nobody's there yet. Normally it's like sardines packed and nobody's there yet. We're smart. We do it this way. And we go up on top of Calvary. Everybody gets to touch. I say, if you were to touch the top where you're touching now, 2,000 years ago, your hands would come up sticky with his blood. That's what you're touching. People cry. They go up and we touch Calvary. Then we come down, take a tour of the church, and then we have Mass at the tomb. So this is those 2 you have to go to. The Nativity where he's born and where he was crucified and buried. The third place I would have to have, it would be Nazareth at the Church of Annunciation, because that's where God became man. When the angel spoke to Mary and we're standing in front of the cave down below, and I said, this is where the angel Gabriel spoke to Mary, right there. Can you believe it? Right there, the angel spoke. And we pray the first joyful mystery, because that's where the words came from, right here. And on the altar there, under that, in the grotto, it says, the Word became flesh here. And at the moment of the Annunciation, Mary was pregnant. And in Nazareth is where God became man. That is where the incarnation, the enfleshment of took place. Even though he was so small, you wouldn't have been able to see him with the naked eye at the moment because it was just almost infinitesimally small cells. So without Nazareth, there would be no Bethlehem. There would be no Jerusalem, Calvary, none of that. It all starts right there in Nazareth. So I would take people to Nazareth, the birthplace of Christ's nativity, and the Holy Sepulchre if I had only 3 places.
Oh, that just makes me want to go on a pilgrimage. So for all of those, of you listening, definitely check out your website and see what's coming up.
And I would just say real quickly that not all pilgrimages are created equal, by the way. There's a lot of groups coming. There's a lot of people that don't have a clue what they're doing. They'll sell it well and they'll sell it cheap. But ours are more expensive than other groups because we do it well, and I don't charge you a penny when you're over there. Everything is up front. I don't trick you and say, okay, now while you're there, you owe this, you owe that. So not all pilgrimages are created equal. And I'm at every site. I teach at every site that we go along the way. And I've used the same guide, Roman Catholic guide from Nazareth. I've used the same guide for 80 trips.
So you trust him, that's for sure.
Oh,
sounds like
him and my wife. We're a guy, and our bus driver, the 4 of us, my wife, and we're the team.
So before we do our closing question, I just want to ask you, have you seen any other miracles or anything with people either? Well, obviously you just talked about that conversion of that man. To me, that's a miracle. But did you experience anything else either during the pilgrimages or afterwards that people wrote you about?
I could write a book. I could write a book of experiences. I've been doing this, my wife and I, for 20 years. And so I'll give you my wife's favorite one. I was telling people at Gethsemane about how when Jesus was on the cross, he was naked on the cross, hanging there. That's how Romans did it. He had lost control of his bodily functions. You have no control over your bodily functions, and you were just hanging there for hours. And a girl said, oh, yeah, her mother brought her, a teenager, maybe 19, 20. Oh, yeah, right. That's really going to happen, she said. And she was she was giving her mom a hard time about everything. She didn't really want to come there. After I talked about Jesus on the cross, losing control of his bodily functions, everything just broke loose when he's hanging on the cross. I mean, this is just the way it was. She said, oh, yeah, right. 10 minutes later, everything broke loose on that girl. She got sick. She had diarrhea. She was vomiting. Everything happened. She fell on the sidewalk and was puking and diarrhea everywhere. And her mother rushed her back to the hotel. And she said, Mom, I am so sorry. God taught me a lesson. I made fun of Steve Ray saying that Jesus lost his bodily functions. And I said that would never happen. And 10 minutes later, it happened to me. She said, that was God teaching me a lesson. She said, I'm really glad to be here with you, Mom. And it changed everything. That's my wife's favorite story. Another one, I'll just really quickly, a lady came. She never spoke on the pilgrimage at all, never said a word. She stayed to herself. At the end of the pilgrimage, we all just left her alone. She obviously didn't want to talk to anybody. At the end of the pilgrimage, before she got on the bus back to the airport, she said, I want to let you know my story. She said, I was going to commit suicide. I've ruined my life. I'm an alcoholic. I've destroyed and lost my family. I've lost hope. I was going to commit suicide. My brother said, I want you to, before you kill yourself, I want you to go on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land with Steve Ray. After that, you can do what you want. She said, I came here. My life has been healed. I have lost all desire for alcohol. She said, God has healed me here. I'm going to go home and get my family back together, and I'm going to be an authentic Catholic. And she got on the bus and left. That was the only word she said to me the whole time.
But what a powerful story.
Yeah, I could write a book. We could write a book.
Well, I hope you do someday. That is just really super inspiring. We so appreciate that. So you know what, Steve, I think that we talked about kind of circling back to the very beginning and just summarizing, if you had just a few minutes with a fallen away Catholic, what would you say?
God gave us one mouth and two ears. It's not what I would say. It's probably what I would listen to. It's a big difference. We think that as soon as we see a fallen away Catholic, we have to convince them they're wrong. I think my first reaction would be, why did you leave? What was the happening? Let them tell me. Let them cry. Let them get angry. I had a guy one time that was in, when we first became Catholic, Al Cresta and I and our family said every Sunday we're going to open our homes, and we'd do it 1 week at his house, 1 week at our house. People would come every Sunday. People would come in the afternoon to talk about the Catholic Church. Most of them had left, or they were angry with the Catholic Church, and they were going to come and tell us why they hated it. So that's fine. Come on over. And in a 2-year period, we saw 200 people come into the Catholic Church because we opened our homes and we listened to them. And one guy went on and on about how he didn't accept the authority of the Pope, and he didn't accept the teachings on Mary and all these theological. And I just got an insight from the Lord. And I said, sir, I said, excuse me. I said, were you ever abused or treated badly by somebody in the Catholic Church? He said, yes. When I was a boy, the priest got mad at me because I was making noise, and he embarrassed me in front of everyone. And I've hated the Catholic Church ever since. I said, the priest shouldn't have done that. And I apologize for the priest. And I would like you to come back to the church. I said, all those other arguments you made, those are only a smokescreen. The reason you really left is because you were angry about something a priest had said to you. And he started to cry. And he said, you're right. And he came back into the church. I could have argued with him about the Pope and Mary all day, but I realized it was something much deeper than that had caused him to leave. And once I listened to him and we discovered what that was, I also think oftentimes it's a daddy issue. Almost every time I have somebody that hates the Catholic Church, or they don't have a good view of God, they don't ever feel forgiven or that they're adequate, I always say, what was the relationship with your father? And 99% of the times they had a bad father, they had an abusive father, or a father that never forgave them or complimented them. See, I told my kids every day that I loved them, that they're marvelous kids. I said, my daughters, you're beautiful. You're the most beautiful girls in the world. You are wonderful. And my son says, Dad, my friends all say their dad never told them that he loved them. He said, you told us every day you loved us. You hugged us and told us that every day. So I always ask, especially men or women, what was the relationship with your father? And usually I'll find the reason that they hate the church or hate God, because they are imposing the view of their earthly father on the heavenly Father.
That does happen. That does happen. I like what you said about the 2 years in my mouth. And I think we should all practice that a little bit more faithfully. Just learn how to listen to people's hurts and just affirm them that in their hurts. But yet you're right. It is hard because we get all excited and we want to, whoa, but listening is such a great entryway into their heart and soul. And I wish people would also realize that the Catholic Church is made up of sinners.
It's a hospital for sinners. That's why I joined it. I joined it because it's a hospital for sinners. Yes, it's a haven for saints too, but not all of us are in that category. And just about listening to people, no one is going to care about what you say if they don't first think that you care about them. The way you care about them and show that you care and you love them is by listening to them. And if you're not willing to listen and just show your love and your concern for them, they're going to have no interest in what you have to say.
Beautiful. Thanks for that reminder. I appreciate that. And so I want to thank you, Steve. I want to thank H&H Digital for helping us with all our webinars. And also to our Veil Remove team. I also want to thank Janet because it sounds like she's been a tremendous and beautiful influence on your life. And also to my prayer warriors that are in the other room, and Marie that's on the other side of the computer here throwing me notes. Oh my gosh, look at that picture you're holding.
That was our family a year and a half ago. We have 2 new ones since then, but that's our family that we're proud of right there.
That's amazing. God bless you all.
Yeah.
Oh, I also I want to thank all our prayer warriors and all our financial contributors. We, again, could not do this without you. Please check out our website, The Veil Removed. And I'd also like to thank our priests, our seminarians, our deacons, and our sisters who help us every day walk closer with God. And Steve, do you want to just give us what you're doing the next, few months, and also how we can reach you as well?
Sure. I just finished a book on Genesis published by Ignatius Press. It's going to be over 500 pages. We're just doing the editing now. It'll be published next year. It's going to be called Genesis. I don't know the full title. We are busier than ever with speaking. I'm already fully booked for speaking engagements through the middle of next year, so I'm not taking any new speaking engagements. Our pilgrimages this year are already sold out. We have 5 more going, 3 to Israel and to Jordan, St. Paul Cruise and Oberammergau. They're all sold out except the December. We have a trip over Christmas called the Christmas Holy Land family trip. People bring their families, and it has a huge impact on their kids. We still have a few seats on that one right after Christmas, but our trips are sold out. But we're already starting getting people ready to go next year, a lot of them to the Holy Land. And we're just, I do a lot of radio and so on. And I really enjoyed working with you too, Diane. You ask good questions. You're a very good host, by the way. I do this all the time. So I have the authority to say that because I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of hosts. You did a very nice job. So my wife and I, our life is consumed with writing, with being with our grandkids, leading pilgrimages all over the world, only to Catholic sites. If you said we're gonna send you to Hawaii, I'd say, why would I want to go to Hawaii? What's biblical or Catholic about that? I'd rather go to biblical. One of our favorites that we ever went to was Iraq because that's where everything started. The Garden of Eden, Abraham, everything. That was one of our favorite places to ever visit. But so follow us on our website is CatholicConvert.com. If you can have that on the bottom of the screen when we're doing this at the end, CatholicConvert.com. Everything's on there. Hundreds of documents and letters I've written. That's free for people to print and give away, use whatever they want, charts on the sacraments, whatever. CatholicConvert.com. I've got our pilgrimages there. I've got my store. You mentioned earlier my DVDs. We've spent 20 years making these. They're filmed all over the world, everywhere, that whole story of salvation history from Abraham to Augustine. And Ignatius Press invested $3 million to do that series. And they're successful. They're great for kids. Study guides include kids and schools and seminaries and Bible studies. People are using them all over the world. So that's what we're doing. We're having fun. I feel like I'm retired and just doing what I love to do now.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. We'll certainly do our best to get your website out there. And just thanks again. We so appreciate it. And I also know you're taking a pilgrimage next fall with Iowa Catholic Radio. So
yes.
My husband and I will probably be on that one. So
we're already getting people signed up, which is unprecedented because that's still a year and a half away, but we're still getting a good number of people registering already for that one.
Good. Well, I better get on it. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Would you like to take us out in prayer, please?
Sure. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we're grateful to you that you created us in your image to share your love and joy and happiness with us creatures made in your image. And thank you that even though we fell into sin and broke away, you sent your Son to redeem us. And you every day have a great love affair, wooing us and calling us back to yourself, and the great nuptial meal of the Eucharist, which you've invited us all to. We thank you for this opportunity to share all this wonderful truth of the Catholic Church and all the salvation that you brought to us. And thank you for Diane and all she's doing to bring the truth of Catholicism and the Eucharist to the world. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.
Thank you, Steve. Reach Steve at CatholicConvert.com. And if you want to check out theveilremoved.com, where you'll see the film and all our resources as well. Thank you for joining us, Steve, and God bless all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.